All right, guys, we're going to do something a little bit different this week. Number one, we've had a lot of interviews lately. So we're going to go with a solo podcast from me. So just me. And we're going to be cutting this into a 2-part episode. I'm going to try and make these a little shorter, more bite-sized for you. I'm aiming for 20 minutes per episode. This week is part 1. Next week is part 2 of something that I think most of us struggle with this. You've already read the title, so you know this is about control. If you are a control freak, this episode is for you. I'm a recovering control freak. And man, I will tell you that the more I have tried to control what is uncontrollable in my life, the more unhappy I've been. And the idea of surrender is something we hear so much about, right? We have a lot of self-help, a lot of people telling us to surrender. And we're like, how the freak do we actually surrender? So in this 2-part episode, this week, we're going to talk mostly about what it is that we're trying to control and why it does not help us, why it just does us a disservice to try. And then next week, we're going to talk about how to actually let go of control and experience something beautiful we call surrender. Now, to that word surrender, ironically, I just had a life coaching session this week with my coach, Alejandra, and we talked about surrender. And while this is something that I've taught for years, she had a really great perspective on the word surrender. She said so many people think surrender is a verb, but it's not. It's not something to do. So it's not something you do, is what she said. It is the result of an action or a choice that you make. And I love that. So then you can almost when you don't know how to surrender, when people are like, just surrender it to God. Well, what the freak do you mean surrender it to God? Okay, so surrender is the result of an action or a choice. So I'm holding a pen. This is her example. I'm holding a pen. When I actually surrender this, right? When it's surrendered or surrender, well, what I'm going to say is this. I'm holding this pen. My action or my choice is to let go. That result, the pen not in my hand, the result is surrender, right? So it has been surrendered because I've chosen to let go. And I love that. So, okay, we're going to dive into this. We're going to dive into this because I know there's a lot of you guys listening that are struggling with this. And in fact, Drew and I had our event a handful of weeks ago. And that was the number one thing that people were dealing with there was trying to control the uncontrollable. And there's something so beautiful about water when we do water therapy, cold water therapy. You're forced in that moment to surrender to the water, to let go to the water, and you experience surrender. And with surrender comes peace. Now, when you try and fight the water, if you were there and you're listening to this, you know, when you try to fight the water, the experience is terrible. It's awful. But when you're in and you listen to the cues of the beautiful people at Reconnect, Melissa and Lauren and Jeremy, who were guiding us through, and their cues were let go. Like, what do you need to let go to the water today? Oh, and it was so good. And once you relax into it, the experience becomes no longer uncomfortable and it becomes beautiful. Surrender is something, and letting go is something that so few of us do. We don't even understand the beauty that can come with it. It doesn't even make sense in our minds that surrender is something that is good for us, right? Because we've never experienced it. Okay, before I jump into the content for this episode, I want to ask you 4 questions, and then I'm going to read you a quote. This episode has a handful of my favorite quotes in it. So the questions I want you to think about each of these. Question number 1, is it possible that there is another path for you other than the path that you have been struggling along for so long? Is it possible that there's another path for you other than the one that you have been struggling on for so long? The second question I want you to ask, is it possible that the things you are so focused on solving in your life cannot be solved by you alone? The choices of those closest to you, maybe. like things that are happening as a result of choices of those closest to you. Maybe some of the problems you're struggling with right now, maybe your work ethic, even your intelligence, all of these things. Is it possible? Question number 3, is it possible that more work and longer hours and more conversations and more hustle, more grind, is it possible that more of all of those things will not solve the problems you're dealing with after all? Right? We think they're going to. Also, question number 4, is it possible that your view of what it takes to be successful and experience peace and joy isn't the full picture? Is it possible that you are inside of a space in your life right now where there's a blind spot? And I believe that right there is the key to growth, to acknowledge and understand that we all have blind spots. And maybe you have a blind spot right now that if you choose to see through these next 2 episodes, your life will be opened up for you. So I want you to hold on to your answers for all of these questions. So there's a handful of questions. Hold on to the answers. Keep them in your heart. Keep them in your mind. This is kind of what we're going to be going through today. So the quote is from the author Michael Singer, author of The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself. The quote is this. Oh, I love this. He says, "The truth is that most of life will unfold in accordance with forces far outside of your control, regardless of what your mind says about it." Oh, I'm going to read it again, and then I'm going to ask a question. The truth is that most of your life, it's actually going to unfold in accordance with forces so far outside of your control, regardless of what your mind has to say about it. So in other words, it doesn't matter what you think and what you say. Your life's going to unfold the way it's meant to, the way that God meant for it to, the way that the universe, whatever you believe in, the way that Creator meant for it to, no matter what your mind says about it. So then the follow-up question to that is, what would happen in your life if you gave up the need to control every little thing? The weather, the parking, the fact that the parking lot is full and you're frustrated, like the flat tire you got, the number on the scale, what your kids are saying and doing, the grades they got, whether they're following through with the things you think they need to follow through with or not, the careers they've chosen, what your friends are choosing to do and say, what really anyone around you in your life is choosing to do and say, whether it's about you or not. Think of how many things we try to control. Think of how many things. And if you're like, I don't try to control it. Well, if you're frustrated about any of those things, the presidential election, you name it, frustration is a way of you trying to control. You're mad. And it's like the more mad you are, and the more I try and tell people and say what I believe in, the more you're going to change it. You're not going to change it. You're not going to change anything. In fact, if you try and change your kids, we know this by now, that which you resist persists. So the more you try to control or to fight back, the more it fights you back, the less control you actually have of it. And I think we can all point to things in our life right now where that's the case. Right? Trying to control your spouse. The more you try and control your spouse, the more mad they get at you and the least sway you even have over them. Am I right? I am right. And I know there are some of you guys listening to this right now that they're like, oh my gosh, Heidi, this is exactly what I needed. And it's exactly what I needed too. I needed to be reminded of this. And this is a lesson I've had to think through a lot. Nothing about this last year and a half of my life went the way I would have wanted it to. But also I recognize I can't control other people's choices. I can't control the consequences of their choices. I can't control that the consequences of their choices hurt me. I can't control that. And so I didn't even try. Truly, I did not even try. And it was the best thing I could have done, to let what was be what it was, to let what is be what it is. Now, I'm not the master of surrender and letting go, you guys. I still struggle to control my kids, right? How they spend their money, how they treat me, how they act as siblings. I really do. What they're doing next year out of high school for Maddox, for Marley, it's your last year of high school? Are you prepping enough? If you were to ask my kids, they'd be like, my mom is the most controlling mom on the planet. And it's true. I am. And this is a thing. I say this lesson. I feel like in so many areas of my life, I have been able to relinquish control so well. With men, finally, I tried to fix and to control them forever. With business even, I've stopped trying to control it. And it works out beautifully. With my kids, I'm still working on it. With parts of who I am, I'm still working on it. With what other people say about me, I don't really care anymore. I've kind of let that go, right? So as you hear me saying this stuff though, I'm sure a lot of you guys are thinking, okay, Heidi, is giving up the desire to control the same as not caring? You're telling me to give up the desire to control my kids, my spouse, my employees, right? Does that mean I don't care and I just give up? Okay, so here's my thought on that. Actually, follow-up questions. Let me say it this way. Could you give up control of your teenagers and still be an authoritative parent? Yeah. Okay. Could you give up trying to control how your work is received? Think about it. If you're an employee, when your work's not received well, you're pissed, right? But could you give up trying to control how your work is received and still be a dedicated employee? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Your boss is going to love you more if you can detach from how your work is received. Be a dedicated employee who just works harder. Then the third thing I'm going to say is, could you give up the need to control your spouse and still be loving toward them? Yeah, and I would beg to say that the more you gave up the need to control your spouse and the more you love them for all of who they are, the more they're going to see you as loving them, the more they're going to feel your love, and probably the more they're going to do what you end up wanting them to do because you're not trying to control them anymore, right? So I'm going to share a couple more quotes from Michael Singer. He basically wrote the book on surrender called The Surrender Experiment. He wrote a handful of books, so surrender is the idea that we give up, but not to the situation. Okay, so we give up, but not to the situation. We give up on the notion that we should or can manage the situation. Okay, so we're not giving up on life, right? We're giving up on the notion that we should or can manage all of the parts of life. We can't. We give up on the idea that we need to control the world around us. We can only control us, right? We can't control the world around us. So what this is ultimately, it's an act of acceptance. It's the acceptance of what is. Things like our imperfections, our limitations, our disappointments, our pain, our people in all of who they are, our kids, our moms, our dads, our employees. We're not giving up on the situation. We're giving up on the notion that we can control or over micromanage them, because we cannot. Guys, what this is, it's an act of humility to surrender. It's a beautiful act of humility to surrender. So we turn our ego and our self-will over to a deeper wisdom or a knowing within us, which is our highest self. I'm sure you've heard the term before, your highest self. Like, is this choice in line with your highest self? And you're like, what the heck is that? Your highest self is the best you possible. It's the highest version of you, the one that you envision, that you know you can be, or that you at least want to believe you can be. Your highest self has turned their ego and self-will over to a deeper wisdom, over to the knowing within them, within you, And that is your highest self. So another really, really great quote. Okay. Great quote number, I don't even know, 3. Same book, Michael Singer's book. Oh, okay, I'm going to have to read this twice, and it's going to take a lot, so try and bear with me. What would happen if we respected the flow of life and used our free will to participate in what's unfolding instead of fighting it? Oof, okay, that's section number 1. I'm not done. What would happen if you listening to this, if you respected the flow of life and if you used your free will to participate in what's unfolding for you, unfolding instead of fighting it? Next part, he says, what would be the quality of life that unfolds? Like, okay, would it be a crap show or would it be beautiful? What would be the quality of life that unfolds? He says, would it be random events with no order or meaning? Or would the same perfection of order and meaning that manifests in the rest of the universe manifest in everyday life around us? Oof. So he's basically saying, okay, what would happen if you surrendered and you just respected the flow of life and you let your life unfold and you stopped believing that they would die without me? Because they're not going to. If you stopped believing that you have to control everything to manipulate it and make it the way that you need it to be, what if you let that go? What if you tried to let go and surrender happened? Would it be random events with no order or meaning? Or, he says, would it be just as beautiful as the way nature and universe is unfolding every single day? We're going to get to this in a sec, but nature is beautiful and we don't have any control over it. I can't get to that part yet. Here's the deal though, guys. Everything we fight has power over us. Like if we're trying to control something, what's happening is that thing is actually controlling us. When we try to fight us, it is actually controlling us. When we're hung up on what someone's saying about us or how our mother-in-law hates us, you're allowing that person to have control and power over you. Amen. Period. End of story. What we accept has no control over us. That which we can actually accept has no power or control over us. So what I was going to say about nature, nature's a rhythm. It's beautiful. We don't control any of it. We can't control any of it, no matter how hard we try. We just can't. And guess what? It's perfect. It's perfect. We can't control the waves of the ocean, and they're amazing. We can't control the temperature, and I don't know, Arizona suns are freaking hot, but truly, it's beautiful how the earth is. We can't control when the sun shines or when it hides, but it happens beautifully. But with every single other thing in our lives, we try to control the uncontrollable, right? We're all the things outside of us that don't even pertain to us. We try to control, or we're so bothered by it that it's controlling us, right? Trying to control it with our thoughts. Like, okay, if I think about this enough, then it's going to go away. No, it's not. No, it's not. The people are going to say mean things about you, whether you think about it or not, right? You thinking about it and trying to control and manipulate and maybe go say something to so-and-so so they can tell so-and-so and they can, get rid of what no, feathers are spread in the wind. You can't control that. We stress over timelines. We worry about our kids. We stress over the fact that we're not seeing the results we want fast enough with any of our goals, right? We worry about the fact that someone was cold or mean to us. Like, what does that mean about me? Right? When we have that desire to control our life, by definition, we have expectations over how that thing will turn out, right? There's a quote that I post often. I love it. It says, what messes us up most in life is the picture in our heads of how it's supposed to be. So we have a picture in our heads of what life is supposed to be like. And then we spend our days trying to shove what's happening into the picture in our heads, right? And it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. And to those of you who have experienced letting go and surrender, you know how much more beautiful life is when you let go of the picture in your head of what it's supposed to be. It's so much more beautiful. So what happens if we give up control? Does that mean we quit? Do we get stepped on? Do we give up? Do we settle? No, in fact, quite the opposite. When we give it up, we have the ability to become butterflies. There's this really awesome book called Psycho-Cybernetics. And Psycho-Cybernetics, it was written in 1960 by Maxwell Maltz, who was a plastic surgeon, and he worked with a lot of patients doing external changes, like patients who had external damage to their face from birth defects or scars. And the more surgeries he did, the more he realized that he enjoyed fixing the inner scars more than the outer scars. So this book that he wrote has actually become a self-development classic. And some of the big gurus like Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, a lot of people have based their techniques on what he gave in this book. So I love that Maltz, the author, talks about something called the success instinct. I love this. Write this down. He says, success has nothing to do with prestige symbols, but success is determined by our creative accomplishments. So everything in nature, he says, has a success instinct. Squirrels don't need to be taught how to gather nuts. Birds don't need to be taught how to fly or to navigate. Caterpillars do not need to be taught to cocoon and become a butterfly. We as humans have a success instinct too, right? We have something called an automatic creative mechanism. If you've been in any of my classes, I talk about this a lot because I love it. So it essentially means that we all have the innate ability to do great things. As human beings, we are wired. Our success instinct and the creative mechanism, the automatic creative mechanism that's there, is made to help us do great things. I want you to think of this ACM, automatic creative mechanism, as a self-driving car, like an internal self-driving car. So our conscious mind is the operator. Okay, so our conscious mind, conscious is like what we're thinking about. It starts the car, it inputs the goal, and then the subconscious mind is the car. We don't know how it works, but it just does. Right? It accepts the goal. It delivers us to the destination. We trust that it's going to get us where we want to go. All the best creatives have used this process. Albert Einstein, Charles Darwin, they all use this. There have been so many famous authors who have also said that their big ideas and their big discoveries actually came after they gave up control and they set their work down. So their automatic creative mechanism could work, right? They put their conscious mind aside, started thinking about something else, and then bam, their big discovery came. They got the answer that they were working so hard for. And it's their conscious mind the entire time was going in the background. I talk more about this in episode 18. I talk about the conscious and the subconscious mind. I refer them, like I say, the conscious mind is like the captain of the ship and the subconscious is like the crew that follows orders. Episode 18, it was part 2 of No Fail New Year. If you want to hear more on that, go listen because there's a whole episode on that. It's really good, life-changing information. Okay, back to the ACM, the automatic creative mechanism. So how do we use the power of our automatic creative mechanism? Well, we have to trust that it's working first and foremost, because it is working. Our job, though, is to, number 1, imagine a clear picture. Number 2, get clear about our desires. And number 3, take action. Because letting go and surrendering does not mean that we don't take action. We still take action. Then it's the job of the ACM, the automatic creative mechanism, our subconscious mind, to get us to where we want to go. Guys, it's a really beautiful thing to let go of our need to control everything and everyone around us. And I want you to keep in mind, we can work really hard and not have to control everything at the same time. In fact, the more we don't control everything and we work hard, the more life works out for us. These two concepts of working hard and not controlling, they indeed do coexist. They can and they do. They are better when they are together. So we can still have goals and a work ethic, and then also be open to the possibilities that the universe and God is throwing at us. It's really pretty. So I'm going to end today's episode with another quote from Michael Singer from his book, The Surrender Experiment. The quote is this. This is a really good one too. He says, "My formula for success was very simple. Do whatever is put in front of you with all your heart and soul without regard for personal results. Do the work as though it were given to you by the universe itself because it was." I'm going to read that one more time because this could be your formula for success as well. So my formula for success was very simple. Do whatever is put in front of you with all your heart and soul without regard for personal results. Do the work as if it was given to you by God and universe itself because it was. Oh, so good. Such a powerful quote. So here's my challenge or invitation for you for this week. Remember today, I explained at the beginning, was about being aware, understanding that we have control issues, understanding what surrender is. So today's invitation, this week's invitation, is going to be around awareness. I want you to simply go throughout your week, pay special attention to when you feel like you're struggling to control a situation, any situation. Really, you could even have it be something where, when you're irritated or upset or frustrated and you can't get your mind off of it, that's something you're trying to control. Okay. Be aware of those. Be like, oh my gosh, that's that thing Heidi was talking about. Be aware of what these are. And then I want you to make notes on it. And that's all. Because awareness is the first step in healing and recovering from anything. So this week, I just want you to be aware. I want you to realize how often you try to control things, or how often things that you try to control have actual control over you. And then next week, for part 2 of this 2-part series, we're going to be sharing, and when I say we, I, but you're going to be there. So we're going to be there. I'm going to give you 3 powerful ideas about control, and then how to release your need to control the uncontrollable around you. So today is the what. Next week, we're going to dive into the how. So come back next week. I hope something beautiful resonated with you from this episode. I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you for being here with me, and I will see you next week.